Buck served as a senior advisor to both House Speakers John Boehner and Paul Ryan. He has a new opinion piece in the New York Times titled, "A Failed Speaker Vote for Kevin McCarthy Would Be an Historical Event." Brendan, you've certainly experienced a lot of challenges to the speakers you work with, Republicans both. I want to read an excerpt from that story, that opinion piece that you write about what could play out tomorrow. And you write, in the event of a stalemate, Mr. McCarthy could face an important strategic question: keep members on the floor voting while he seeks to cut a deal, or invite an even more unpredictable closed-door meeting of his conference. He may find that the best way out is through, by continuing to vote in a test of wills with people who are defying the choice of their conference. So, Brendan, do you think that that's the strategy he would employ if it becomes stalemated?
I do think it is the choice that he's going to go with. Look, I think the most important thing to appreciate right now is we would be walking into a situation that no one in the House has ever seen before. The last time we failed on the first vote for a speaker was 100 years ago. It's only happened once since the Civil War. And the options procedurally are not very many. This is the first thing that the House does when it comes in. It can not do anything else until the speaker question is resolved. The next order of business could simply be to vote again and vote again and vote again. The option is, of course, is to take a break. They could adjourn. They could go into a conference meeting. But if I'm Kevin McCarthy, I don't know what I'm walking into in a conference meeting at that point. These people at that point have done what they said they were going to do. They've backed up their vote. And I think he just needs peer pressure. There is a lot of pressure on the floor. And when you're voting live, I think it might be best for them to keep them there and try to build up the pressure in real time. But there's no guarantee that that is going to work. I can't tell you with any confidence right now who the next Speaker of the House is going to be.
It is so extraordinary. There are, additional members, Republican members, who said that they're not dead set against him, but they want more from him. So is he going to have to concede so much that he's really handcuffing himself going forward?
There are a lot of demands that some members have made. Some members, frankly, don't even care. They just don't like Kevin McCarthy. There's a couple of them in particular, Bob Good and Matt Gaetz, who clearly have very personal vendettas, and I don't know that they're ever in play. But a lot of the members are asking for changes to the rules, how the House operates. Things like how many amendments are they going to be able to make in order? Are they going to have representation on certain committees? But the big one comes down to what we call the motion to vacate. And this is effectively just a way to kick the Speaker out. And what they are asking for is to go to a way where just a single member at any time could trigger a vote to remove the Speaker. This is something that hung over the head of John Boehner, something that hung over the head of Paul Ryan. Nancy Pelosi changed the rule where it makes it much harder to use. These members want to go back because they think it provides them strength. They say it would be to hold the Speaker accountable, but ultimately it puts a gun to his head and says, you do what we want to do or we'll kick you out at any time. And that's a terrible way to live as a leader. All of this entire exercise is about weakening the Speaker. These members believe that they are stronger if the Speaker is weaker. I don't think that that is actually true. I think it just hurts the conference in general. It hurts the House. It makes him have a harder job negotiating with Democrats. But they seem to believe that weakening the Speaker, whether it be Kevin McCarthy or the next person, is more important. And they seem to be successful so far.
I covered the ouster of Speaker Jim Wright, of course, a Democrat from Texas. But it was the caucus rejected him. It was not a case where there were so many different factions within the Democratic Party at the time.
Yeah, it's important to remember, this is a really small number of people who are objecting to him. Yeah. You have 5 people who are publicly against him. There are rumblings that there may be as many as a dozen. But he is the overwhelming choice of the conference. The problem is these people just don't care. They're the type of people who have never really concerned themselves with whether they are ruining other people's plans. And so it makes it really tough to negotiate with people who, frankly, aren't acting in good faith. And it's hard to nail them down on certain things. He's been making some concessions. He just put out a rules package that would lower the threshold, not as far as they wanted, but lower the threshold on the motion to vacate. But it doesn't seem to have gotten him anything because they don't really want to come to the table. Their goal is to go to the floor and defeat him and then negotiate. So we may be entering, again, an unprecedented in modern times situation on the floor.
Are you surprised that there hasn't been more public support from Donald Trump after McCarthy, of course, spent years pledging his loyalty to Trump, including that somewhat embarrassing visit to Mar-a-Lago just days after the insurrection that he had criticized?
Well, I think he's made clear that he supports Kevin McCarthy, and it's been reported that he was even making some phone calls. I think it's maybe more surprising that hasn't gotten the job done. So that's Kevin McCarthy. It's important to remember he was almost Speaker 7 years ago. Kevin McCarthy stepped down right before he was about to succeed John Boehner, and that's how Paul Ryan ended up becoming Speaker. And I think everything he has done in those 7 years has been to avoid this situation. He has made inroads with the Freedom Caucus. He has made Jim Jordan, the former Freedom Caucus leader, one of his closest allies. He has, of course, gotten very close to Donald Trump. He rehabilitated Donald Trump. I think all of these things were in an effort to be able to, when the moment came, to tell these people, you can trust me. I'm a conservative. I'm on your side. I'm with the team. And it's really probably very frustrating for him to get to this moment and have all of those things that he did, all that stuff he took a lot of grief for from a lot of people, and have it not paying off. Look, he may still get there. I can't tell you who's going to be Speaker at this point. But the fact that we are a day away and it's not wrapped up has got to be extremely frustrating.
Do you see a consensus candidate, perhaps Steve Scalise, the whip, emerging?
I see it being very difficult for anybody to really emerge, if you will, until or unless Kevin McCarthy kind of throws in the towel. I think if Steve Scalise were to say after a failed vote, declare he was challenging him, that would cause all kinds of turmoil. And let's remember, if it's not Kevin McCarthy, and it may still well be, but if it's not Kevin McCarthy, that person also needs 218 votes. And if this person is seen as being part of taking Kevin McCarthy out, you're probably going to have a lot of really upset members on the other end. Is a Kevin McCarthy going to vote for a Steve Scalise if Steve Scalise tries to come out and take him out? So you may have to see a few votes before anybody can really emerge. Certainly he's the number two. If it's not Kevin McCarthy, he's clearly going to be at the top of the list. But I would just be really patient on any credible candidate really emerging until Kevin McCarthy comes to some conclusion that it's not going to turn out for him. Again, I'm not predicting that that's what's going to happen. But I think we could have a pretty long process ahead of us.
Of course, you've witnessed the experience that Speakers Boehner and Ryan had with fighting the Tea Party and the Freedom Caucus. But as you've been pointing out, this is even a more disparate group of rebels, if you will, who all have different interests.
That's right. And it makes it really hard to negotiate them because there's not one clear thing that they're all asking for. A lot of them, again, want some type of accommodation on the motion to vacate or other rules packages. But Bob Good, for example, from Virginia, apparently feels slighted that Kevin McCarthy tried to prevent him from taking out one of their incumbents. Bob Good defeated a standing Republican, and as the Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy tried to stop that. When Bob Good was successful, he apparently didn't care for that and had been holding a grudge against him for a few years. Matt Gaetz apparently has some grudge about the comments that Kevin McCarthy made privately that were leaked about after January 6th. So they all have their own little things, and some of them may just never come around. There are a few that are really just asking for some rules changes. And if they're just asking for something, there potentially may be a way to get there. It does feel like a lot of these things are going to have to be given into to get there. It's probably going to have to be the motion to vacate in the old way. Otherwise, there's probably not much of a path. And that may have been the reality all along. And we just had to kind of get there. And the vote is not now. The vote is not for another day. There is still time to avoid a messy floor fight. And frankly, you probably don't want to come to an agreement any earlier than right now. People aren't going to show their cards until the last minute. So there's still hope for him, but there's probably going to need to be a lot more accommodations made before now and then.
And just now off the floor, he was expressing some confidence to reporters. Let me read you the transcript. We could show you some pictures because they just did encounter him walking through the halls there. And he was asked, do you have the votes locked in? He replied, and take away all the excitement, joking. So do you have the votes locked in was the next question. I think we will have a good day tomorrow, he said. Leader McCarthy, are you prepared to make more concessions in exchange for votes, was the question. He sighed and said, hope you all have had a very nice New Year's. So kind of walking through the halls and giving an air of confidence, at least, Brendan.
Yeah, and he needs to project optimism. And again, he is the overwhelming choice of that conference. And so I think what he's going to need to be relying on is peer pressure from his colleagues. There's a lot of people, very conservative members, who are backing Kevin McCarthy, and he's going to have to hope that peer pressure can build on them. but there's no real way to know. And when you get to the floor, that's when pressure builds. It's one thing to say you're going to vote against the leader of your own party. It's a whole other thing to actually do it on the floor, stand up and say someone else's name. And I think he's going to be hoping that pressure puts enough people back in his corner. But I think clear from there, this is still a work in progress.